My family laughed at my $10 hoodie at my sister's lavish engagement party, and her fiancé sneered, "Did you Uber here?" They've always thought I was the family failure. So, I just nodded. The next morning, that same fiancé walked into my boardroom asking me, the woman in the hoodie, for a multi-million-dollar investment. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The private club was nauseatingly opulent. It smelled like old money and new, a cloying mix of antique wood polish and expensive competing perfumes. I had been working for 72 hours straight, closing a brutal acquisition deal that had involved 3 different time zones and enough caffeine to stop a human heart. I was exhausted. My brain felt like cotton, and all I wanted was my bed. Instead, I was at my sister Sophie's engagement party. I hadn't even had time to go home. I'd come straight from the office, still in what my CFO, Benedict, called my crisis uniform, a worn, comfortable $10 grey hoodie, a pair of faded jeans, and sneakers. It was the last thing on my mind. My company had just absorbed a major competitor, a move that would secure our position in the sustainable tech market for the next decade. My clothes were irrelevant. To my family, however, they were everything. I spotted them holding court by a massive floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. My sister Sophie looked like a princess from a movie, draped in a white silk dress that probably cost more than my first car. She was flanked by our aunts, uncles, and cousins, all of them glittering and pined. As I approached, the bubble of cheerful conversation didn't just quiet down. It popped. Every eye went to my hoodie. "Emma," my mother said, her voice tight with that familiar brittle disappointment. "You came, you look tired." "I am, Mom." "It's been a long week," I said, trying to summon a smile. Sophie, however, had no such restraint. Her perfectly painted smile faltered, replaced by a flash of genuine anger. "Emma, really? You couldn't try? Just once. It's my engagement party. Look at you. It's embarrassing." "I'm sorry, Sophie. Work was intense." I offered weakly. "Work?" My uncle snorted, adjusting his bow tie. "Still tinkering with those little computer projects in your garage, Emma?" They still thought I ran a glorified repair shop. I had never corrected them. Years ago, I had tried to explain what my company, Heliosk, did, that we were developing carbon capture technology and advanced battery storage. Their eyes had glazed over to them. If it wasn't law, medicine, or real estate, it wasn't a real job. It was just Emma's hobby. It was then that he appeared, sliding an arm around Sophie's waist. Marcus, the fiancé. I had only met him once before, and my impression had been one of polished, empty arrogance. He was handsome in a way that seemed focus grouped, with perfect teeth and a watch that screamed its price tag across the room. He looked me up and down, a slow, condescending smirk spreading across his face. "This is her," Sophie said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "This is my sister, Emma." Marcus chuckled. It wasn't a kind sound. "This is the brilliant older sister you told me about. The one who's artistic." He leaned in, his voice loud enough for everyone in our circle to hear. "Rough night, did you Uber here?" The implication was clear. I couldn't possibly afford a car. I couldn't possibly afford the valet. I was the poor relation, the family failure, the One who had dropped out of a prestigious college all those years ago and never recovered. The laughter from my cousins was polite but sharp. I looked at Sophie, hoping for even a flicker of defense. She just looked away, fussing with Marcus' lapel, her cheeks pink with shame. Not shame for him, but shame for me. I was too tired to fight. Too tired to explain that I had driven myself in a car that cost more than his entire outfit or that the tinkering I did was currently valued at $9 billion. It didn't matter. In their eyes, I was and always would be the girl in the $10 hoodie. I gave a small, weary nod. Something like that. Well, Marcus said, patting my shoulder with a painful amount of condescension. Don't bother the servers too much. I'm sure the champagne is a bit outside your usual price range. He stared Sophie away, and the laughter resumed, leaving me standing alone in their wake. I stayed for another 10 minutes, just long enough to be polite, before slipping out the door. No one noticed me leave. As I sat in my car, the quiet hum of the high-performance electric engine a stark contrast to the noise inside, I let my head fall back against the headrest. The humiliation was a familiar dull ache. But underneath it, a new cold feeling was settling in. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was resolve. They thought I was a joke. They had forgotten who I was, what I had built. They had forgotten everything. The betrayal in that moment felt sharper and more painful than any business negotiation I had ever endured. The next day was a Saturday. I had blessedly, mercifully, slept for 10 solid hours, and the fog of exhaustion was finally beginning to lift. I was sitting at my kitchen island nursing a cup of coffee and reviewing quarterly projections on my laptop when my phone buzzed. It was Sophie. I sighed, bracing myself and tapped the speaker phone. Hi, Sophie. I cannot believe you, Emma. No, hello. No, how are you? Just the immediate shrill cut of her indignation. Good morning to you, too, I said dryly, taking a sip of coffee. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? Marcus' parents were there. His boss was there. And my sister, my own sister, shows up looking like she just rolled out of a dumpster. A hoodie, Emma. A grey hoodie. It was clean, I said, unable to help myself. That's not the point, and you know it. It's about respect. You have none? You just float through life in your own little world doing your projects, and you don't care who you humiliate. Marcus' boss, Henry, even asked if you were, struggling. He offered to connect me with a charity. I closed my eyes. Henry, I knew that name. Henry Patterson, CEO of Patterson Capital Investments. A shark. A very, very wealthy shark. So, that was who Marcus worked for. Interesting. Sophie, I was working. I barely made it there as it was. I'm sorry if my clothes weren't up to par, but it was the best I could do. That's your problem, Emma. It's always the best you can do, and it's never good enough. She snapped. Why can't you just be normal? Get a real job, buy a nice dress. Why is that so hard for you? The irony was so thick, I could barely breathe. Here I was, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, being told to get a real job by my sister whose entire career consisted of posting pictures of sponsored products on the internet. I have a real job, Sophie. Oh, please, she scoffed. We all know you're just living off what mom left you. It's sad. I'm just lucky Marcus is so successful. He's going to take care of me. He's going to take care of this whole family. A prickle of alarm went through me. What do you mean? He's got a huge presentation on Monday. Life-changing. He's pitching this massive new energy fund to some private tech firm. He said if he lands this, we are set for life. A house in the Hamptons, a new boat, everything. He's brilliant, Emma. He's going to be one of the most powerful men in the city. She gushed, her voice filled with a reverence that made my stomach turn. This new energy fund? My senses were on high alert. A tech firm? I asked, keeping my voice casual. Which one? Oh, I don't know. Some boring name. Helios something. Who cares? The point is, he's a success. He makes an effort. You should try it sometime. I've got to go. We are looking at yachts. The line clicked dead. I stared at the phone, the pieces clicking into place with a sickening thud. Helioac, my company. Marcus was pitching my company on Monday. The humiliation from the night before was instantly replaced by a cold, sharp dread. Marcus wasn't just an arrogant fool. He was an arrogant fool who was about to walk into my boardroom. And my sister, the person whose future was now tied to his, had just broadcasted his entire life-changing plan to me. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Benedict, my CFO. Me, Benedict, can you send me the full due diligence package on the Patterson Capital pitch for Monday? I want to review it myself this weekend. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Benedict, of course. Everything okay? I thought you were taking the weekend off. Me? Change of plans. I'll be leading the Monday meeting. Benedict, they're just a mid-level fund. This is SVP Marcus' last name. You don't need to handle this. I can. Me? No, I need to handle this one personally. I thought about Sophie, her voice dripping with disdain as she told me to get a real job. I thought about Marcus, his cruel smirk as he asked if I'd taken an Uber. Sophie was right about one thing. He was pitching a company called Helios something. But she had forgotten one crucial thing. She had forgotten who had founded it. They had all forgotten. The roots of my family's willful ignorance ran deep. Planted 20 years ago in the sterile white halls of a hospital. I was 19 in my sophomore year at a top-tier university on a full-ride scholarship for physics. Sophie was a carefree 14-year-old already obsessed with fashion and popularity. Then our mother got sick. It was a brutal, fast-moving cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months. My father had passed years earlier, leaving us with a modest life insurance policy. Why? In a house that was falling apart. There was no one else. So, I dropped out. I came home and spent the next year learning to administer 4 drips, manage pain medication schedules, and hold my mother's hand as she faded. Sophie, by contrast, retreated. She couldn't handle the sickness, the fear, the reality of it. She buried herself in school, friends, and applying for summer programs abroad. I didn't blame her. She was just a kid. I was the older sister. It was my job. When our mother passed, she left us what little she had, the house, and about $50,000 in savings. Sophie, then accepted into a university in London, took half of the money for her tuition and living expenses. It was what Mom would have wanted. I took my half and stayed in the garage of the house we could no longer afford. While Sophie was attending fashion shows and networking at European parties, I was soldering circuit boards and writing code. I sold the house, moved into a tiny apartment, and poured every cent and every waking hour into an idea I'd had in my physics classes, a new hyper-efficient method for utility-scale battery storage. For the first 5 years, I lived on instant noodles and desperation. I took on freelance coding jobs just to pay for new components. I was the dropout, the failure, the eccentric girl who tinkered in her garage. When Sophie came home for holidays, draped in new clothes and talking about her glamorous friends, I was the embarrassing all-stained smudge in the family photos. "When are you going to give up this thing, Emma, and get a real job?" she'd ask, her nose wrinkled at the mess on my dining table. "It's close," I'd murmur, not looking up from a schematic. The family narrative was set in stone. Sophie was the bright, successful, cosmopolitan one. I was the stagnant, sad, underachiever, stuck in the past, unable to move on from mom's death. Then I had my breakthrough. I solved the energy loss problem. I secured my first patent. Within 6 months, I had venture capital. Within 2 years, Heliosk was born. Within 5, we were profitable. Now, 10 years later, we were a quiet giant in the sustainable energy sector, the backbone for half the green energy grids in the country. I never told them. It wasn't a deliberate secret at first. I tried. I'd mention a big contract or a new office and my mother's sisters would just pat my hand and say, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Sophie is modeling for a magazine in Paris?" My success was incomprehensible to them. It didn't look like their definition of success. I didn't live in a penthouse. I lived in a modest private condo. I didn't wear designer labels. I wore hoodies and jeans because I was comfortable in them. I didn't go to GAIAs. I went to energy symposiums and labs. My wealth was silent. It was in stock and patents in the 5,000 employees who worked for me. The disconnect had become a chasm. I was the family charity case. And now Marcus was standing